Dear Clinical Supervisor, my name is Mara and I will be presenting the rationale behind my action intended to resolve an ethical dilemma in the case of Angela. Two ethical obligations are in conflict: confidentiality versus professional responsibility. In the context of this case, they can be stated as my legal obligation to disclose Angela's confidential information to her dad, and my professional responsibility to take reasonable steps to prevent harm to Angela occurring as a result of my conduct. According to standards A21C and A52C, I'm both legally and ethically obligated to grant Angela's father's request for her record. However, Angela's disclosure of suspected psychological abuse at the hands of her father may mean that this right is negated by the Family Violence Protection Act. The APS standard A52C supports this negation, but only if I make a report of child abuse. According to the Children and Youth Families Act of 2005 and the Crimes Act of 1958, mandatory reporting of sexual and/or physical abuse is in place in Victoria. Psychological abuse, however, falls under the legal and ethical grey area of voluntary reporting. The Human Rights and Responsibilities Charter recognises both the rights of the individual to autonomy and safety, but also the family unit's right to not have authorities interfering without good reason. Much of the literature recognises both the lack of benefit and harm related to involving authorities in child abuse, but also the lack of reporting and support given to children experiencing psychological abuse, and the seriousness of the damage it can incur. Upon reflection, I'm aware that I have the belief that men have the potential to be controlling and/or violent. This is due to my female socialization, feminist attitudes, and personal history. This belief could lead me jumping to villainizing the male party, particularly when the victim is a child and/or female. This jumping to conclusions could lead to unnecessary reporting of the suspected and potentially unsubstantiated abuse and negative consequences for both dad, as familial relationships or reputation, or the family, further separation and relationship fracture. Additionally, I have the belief that at-risk persons should be protected or aided. This stems from my role as elder sibling and personal history of acting as carer for family members during difficult times. This is a tendency towards paternalism where it may not be warranted and can lead to preempting the severity of situations without evidence and problem-solving without appropriate respect for those involved's autonomy, leading to relationship strain and unforeseeable worsened consequences. I must be wary that my need to satisfy my own values is not placed over the needs of Angela and associated parties in the case. My ethical rights in this situation are to be able to participate in decisions affecting my life. My vulnerabilities are my sex, legal, and I have legal and ethical vulnerabilities. Angela has a right to confidentiality, informed consent, and a right to participate in the decisions affecting her life. Her vulnerabilities are age, the family unit, and a lack of court order. Dad's rights are to his child's records and his parental rights. His vulnerabilities are to his reputation, the family unit, and a lack of court order. Mum's rights are to her child's records, informed consent, and parental records. Her vulnerabilities are to the family unit and a lack of court order, and also a lack of information, as myself, Angela, and Dad are aware of his behaviour, but Mum potentially is not. Additionally, I would like to consider the constellation of power dynamics within this case. Angela's child status puts her at a significant disadvantage in relation to all adults here, particularly as her mother is the client and she is recipient of the services, leaving her with all the diminishing aspects of being a client and none of the empowering aspects of consumer, as these are passed on to her mother. Her mother is also a greater known element as compared to her father. Two potential resolutions are as follows. One, informed by future-oriented paternalism and prioritizing my legal obligations, is to invite Angela's dad to go through Angela's file in a meeting with parenting supports ready. The second option is informed by feminist ethical decision models and the mediator approach, which involves collaborating with Angela and her mother to first decide whether to report the abuse, which then would dictate whether we give Angela's father her record. Option 1, meeting with dad. The positive consequences could be that dad will reflect upon his behaviour in a supportive environment and commit to behaviour change, and my legal obligations will be adhered to. The negative consequences could be that dad refuses to attend the meeting and takes legal action for my withholding. The meeting could go poorly, could be interpreted as going against my ethical obligation not to coerce or demean. Angela's unsafety could be exacerbated. Mum and Angela could feel betrayed, leaving my therapeutic relationship with Angela damaged. The ethical obligation of mitigating harm is uncertain. Objectively, this is very optimistic, and the negative outweighs the positive, including several value traps are at risk of trapping me. The second option is to collaborate with Angela and her mother. The positive consequences could be that Angela and her mum's autonomy have been respected. Mum might be able to offer insight into dad's behaviour. Angela's safety will be guarded, and my ethical obligations will be met, followed by legal obligations. The negative consequences could be that mum will not be an ally, and that dad might see through the delay and press the matter or take control of Angela, as is his right. Objectively, the positives outweigh the negatives, and the legal and moral rights of others are taken into consideration. I chose option 2, involving Angela and her mother in the decision to report the abuse, followed by whether we give Angela's father her record. To do this, I would invite Angela's mum to her next therapy session, asking mum to wait outside initially while I explain to Angela why it's important to tell mum about dad's psychological abuse. Bring in mum and explain the situation to both, including the legal and ethical obligations, and then act as amicus for Angela's feelings throughout the decision-making process. Note that option 1 might involve enacting option 1. This option aims to mitigate the inequitable power dynamics at play in this situation, with a particular focus on playing mediator and advocating for Angela's feelings, given how her child status lowers her autonomy in this situation. This decision is defensible ethically and legally in resolving an ethical issue pertaining to the case of Angela, and has been come to using the EDMM, ethical decision-making model by Kuchar and Kiespiegel. Thank you for listening.